Hey, today I'm talking about 3 movies I got from the library. Because even though my sister has been a librarian for years, I forgot that libraries are a thing, especially a thing where you could get movies that are hard to find, like all 3 of these. So, today I'm talking about Father Goose, Oldboy, the original one, and the prime of Jean Brodie. It has Maggie Smith in it. Look at her. She's like 35. She's so young. She has no wrinkles. It's weird to see Maggie Smith with no wrinkles. She looks gorgeous, and she is fabulous in this. Quick side note, I filmed the intro several days ago because I had to give the DVDs to my mom because she wanted to watch them, and I didn't have time to record this review until just now. So that's why things are different. A vista is Father Goose. This is a 1964 Cary Grant, Leslie Caron film. If you are unfamiliar, I was madly in love with Leslie Caron last year. She was amazing in Lily, and actually everything I watched her in, she was amazing in. I desperately wanted to watch this movie last year, but I couldn't find it, and it was really expensive to just buy. So I was so incredibly happy when I saw the library had it, and yeah, no, this movie definitely lived up to the hype. It was amazing. I loved this movie a lot. The basic premise is it is World War II, and Cary Grant is a grumpy old drunken man who lives on a boat near Australia. And one day, while he's stealing supplies from the British Navy, the lieutenant nearby is like, "Hey, Cary Grant, I know you. I'm gonna have you go be a watcher." And he's like, "I don't want to do that." And so they trick him to do it with booze. He gets sent to a deserted island to watch out for Japanese planes and boats, and he's supposed to radio in whenever he sees them. Eventually, through reasons that make a lot of sense, Leslie Caron shows up and they have a good fun time. I loved this movie so much. Like, Cary Grant makes the perfect grumpy old man. Like, he nails it spectacularly. And then Leslie plays like this sassy school teacher type vibe, and she is just... I've re-fallen in love with her. She's terrific. Her smile is great. Her sass is great. She nails everything. It's terrific. Ugh. And like, this story is just so silly and lighthearted, but it still makes sense. And honestly, there's moments of like tension where like, you know, something bad could happen. And it's not like weird tonal whiplash either. Like, it makes sense within the story, and they do a good job of building to it. This movie is damn near close to perfection. It's one flaw is, of course, the flaw that happens in a lot of classic Hollywood movies where they have a romantic interest between a man who is 30 years older than a woman. But thankfully, for this movie, they do not focus on it at all. It is a sliver of the runtime. But because it's such a short amount of the runtime, it's super easy to just completely ignore and pretend like it's not a part of this movie. And like, the rest of the movie's charm and charisma just like makes it so that it's incredibly easy to turn a blind eye to the one fault in this movie. So if you haven't gathered, I definitely, without a doubt, recommend this movie. It's just good, wholesome, fun times that like, it's gonna make your day better. I promise. Next up is Oldboy. This is a 2003 Korean movie that has been hyped up to me for years. Like, you know that really cool long take fight scene in Daredevil down the hallway, you know, the big hallway fight scene? This is the movie that inspired that moment. So like, I've been wanting to watch this movie for a good long time. And I was so excited when I found it at the library. I'm like, yes, I can finally watch the thing. It's going to be great. I can't wait. I don't have to watch the stupid American remake. And so I'll be honest, while watching the movie, most of the movie I was like, oh yeah, this is pretty good. I wasn't in particular blown away by anything, but I was definitely enjoying myself. It was a quite liked for me. It's not quite a 5 out of 5. But then we're near the end of the movie and we get to the shot of like 2 characters sitting on a table and one of them says something dramatic. The camera just kind of sits on them as they say they're emotionlessly, not saying anything. And I'm like, oh, this is kind of an interesting choice. And then suddenly it cuts to one of those characters in the middle of a very intense action scene. And I'm like, oh, that was a really strange artistic choice. Let's see how this pans out. And then kind of the rest of the movie, I'm like, I don't really get what's going on. This is weird. The movie's not really explaining itself, and I don't really get it. What is this? And I was just so confused. And I was like, something must be wrong with me where I'm just like, I didn't understand something. So I go to Wikipedia to just kind of like read through the summary to see like if the simplified words of what happened make it make more sense. And so I'm reading through it and I'm like, wait a second, this doesn't sound familiar. No, I definitely would have remembered if this character did this weird, strange thing. I didn't see a scene in this movie. And so I'm like, all right, let's verify this fact. I turn on the DVD player again and go to the chapter select to the scene that I'm like, I think this is the scene they're referring to in the Wikipedia. I click on it. Yep, the DVD is scratched. It skipped over an entire scene. And what makes it 1,000 times worse is that it was literally the most important scene in the entire movie. It's the scene where they finally explain everything, where it all comes together. And I missed it because the DVD player skipped it because the DVD was scratched. I am not happy. To say the least, to say more, I am irate. I am so pissed. Literally, this movie has been building up hype within my head for like 7 years. And I finally got to the moment of payoff. And what happens? I don't get to see it. I will never get to experience the big reveals that this movie has in store as you're meant to see them. And that hurts me so much. I hate it. And I can't put this movie in the really liked because I didn't think it was a really liked. It was quite liked. But had I got to see that scene, it easily would have been a really liked. It probably would be like top 15. But I didn't see the scene as it was intended, so I can't put it in the top 15 because I didn't feel that way about this freaking movie. But yeah, I do recommend this movie, and I pray to God that when you watch it, that your version doesn't skip over literally the most important scene in the entire goddamn movie. And lastly is the prime of Miss Jean Brodie. It stars Maggie Smith. She's so young in this. She's like mid-30s and she is gorgeous. I love her and she is so full of sass. This movie was recommended to me by my mom. She randomly thought of it the other day and was like, hey Charlie, have you seen this? And then I was like, no. And she's like, I have a movie for you that you haven't seen. You should watch it. And I'm like, well, it's not available online unless you want to buy a VHS. But then we found it at the library. And it was interesting. So it starts off like Dead Poet Society, where Maggie Smith is this really cool hip teacher that lets the kids in this very conservative school kind of get away with more stuff, and she teaches them things that the other teachers wouldn't want them to know and stuff like that. And she's like cool and stuff, but then she's also like in love with herself in a sense. She goes around being like, I'm in the prime of my life. I am hot shit. Like, look at me. I am legit tasty. And I'm like, damn right you are, Maggie Smith. You go, girl. That's great. I love this. And she has like a whole story with like some lovers and stuff. I definitely get why my mom liked this movie as a kid, because while watching it, I definitely felt like the perfect movie for like a teenage girl. Like 13, 14, 15 is just kind of like exploring who you are as a person, both as like a teenage girl and then also just like an adult woman who is single but still confident in herself and confident in her sexuality and just like trying to be a really good role model and like all that sorts of stuff. And that's really interesting. But then towards the end, it gets kind of crazy and I didn't entirely understand it. I think partly from like a historical context. And then what threw me a little bit too while reading like the IMDb trivia was this was originally a play and the original actress didn't want to come back. She was like, yeah, I don't want to play that pseudo-fascist again. And I'm like, Gene Brodie's a fascist? What? How did I miss that? And I think I missed it by not understanding some historical references. And then I also wasn't a huge fan of some grooming in this movie. Basically, there's an art teacher that really wants to bang Maggie Smith because fair, but Maggie Smith doesn't want that, so he tries to like convince him to bang this 14-year-old girl. And I'm like, what is this? Messed up. He doesn't. He bangs a 17-year-old later, but it was still weird because she was definitely still one of his students. Spoilers. So yeah, so I don't entirely get this movie. I did still enjoy this movie though. I put it in the quite liked. I would cautiously recommend this movie. I definitely would if you're intrigued. I definitely would if you're a big fan of Maggie Smith. And I think I would if you're a teenage girl. I think even though I didn't understand this, I think you can still get a lot out of this movie. Alrighty, now for today's rankings. First up, we got Father Goose sitting at number 11 in the really like section. It was actually kind of hard to place just because I did love it a lot, and it was just like my top 13 are all movies that I really vibed with. They're a good bunch to be around. It's gonna be hard pressed to beat them in the future. And then after that is Oldboy sitting at number 35, literally right at the top of the quite like section. Like it really should be a really liked, but that DVD ruined everything. And then bringing up the rear is the prime of Miss Brodie, sitting at number 56 in the quite like section. And this is out of a total of 129 old movies so far this year.